fans, welcome back to Room 237. I have a review of another 20 silent film, and this is one from Sweden, and a very influential one that I actually hadn't heard of until recently when I was up looking into silent films. 1921's The Phantom Carriage, and I really enjoyed this film. This is the Criterion release, which I'm really digging these Criterion releases. I only have 3. This, Hexen, and Sallow. But in the future, if I see there's a Criterion release or something, I'm probably going to shoot for those, because these are very well done. This movie looked awesome. I'm sure like Hexen, if I had got the Blu-ray, probably would have looked great as well. But it actually came out New Year's Day, 1921 in Sweden, and then it was finally released in February of 22 here in the States. And it went by several different names. The Stroke of Midnight is what it was released as here in the States in 22. Also known as The Phantom Chariot, Thy Soul Shall Bear Witness. And the Swedish title is, I'm probably going to pronounce this wrong, but Kurkarlen, which is the Swedish word for the wagoner. And there is a lot to appreciate about this film. One, this film alone it's known for its very extensive special effects, which, considering what those effects were and just what went into making them and how great they still look, especially compared to what the same effect would look like now, which I'll get into. This film had a profoundly huge effect on Ingmar Bergman. Apparently, he first saw this when he was 15, watched it at least once a year, and he incorporated a lot of elements and references to the film in several of his own films. Even getting director of Victor Seastrom, which I'm not even going to try to pronounce that last name. In the States, it's spelt out Seastrom, which I have another one of his films with Lon Chaney that I'll get to. He appeared in one of Bergman's films. Also, Kubrick was very inspired by a particular scene in this during the axe on the bathroom door scene in The Shining. Of course, Shining been my lifelong #1 favorite movie. That, along with there's even side-by-side comparisons of that scene, the one from The Shining, which also he had Shelley Duvall watch the Lillian Gish film Broken Blossoms for her performance and reaction to the axe. But this is a pretty interesting film, also narratively, because not only is there flashbacks, there's flashbacks within flashbacks. A pretty interesting story. It kind of has, I don't really want to say like a Christmas Carol sort of error of his ways, kind of a redemption, but somewhat. It does take place on of New Year's Eve. Actually, maybe I'll go a little into the backstory. Seastrom had already adapted several stories by author who was it? Selma Lagerlof. if that's how I pronounce it. He had already directed 3 adaptations of her works. And then, because he had to deal with her to release 1 a year, and then it came time to do this one. And he wanted to do some things a bit differently. And I guess he wrote the script in like 8 days. He read the script aloud to her. And then in acceptance, she bought him dinner. Bought him dinner to talk about it or something like that. And he took that as... Because I guess the other stories were in more of like a rural setting. And he wanted this one to be in a more gritty, kind of Swedish, not really... I guess more like a urban or suburban setting, which the author was kind of nervous about. But then she accepted, and she wanted it to be filmed on location in this one certain village, but for technical reasons, he shot it in a studio. And again, the effects of this film look, still to this day, 99 years later, the effects of just transparent ghosts walking around, what went into making those effects was very difficult for this time. But they still look better than what a CGI ghost would look like, or any real simple CGI effects of last year or the last 5 years. And that's another thing I've noticed going back, or in this case for the first time, some of the effects in these films, whether they're practical or whether they really had to use camera and film trickery. Like with this, it was multiple overlays to get that effect of, I guess it's kind of like superimposing, just putting layers of the film over each other to get the transparent ghost. Still looks better than CGI. But anyway, it takes place on New Year's Eve. It opens up in Salvation Army. I believe it did take place in the one village that the author wanted him to film in, which I'm terrible with Swedish names, so I wanted to actually get the name of it before. Landskrona? Probably mispronounced that. But anyway, it's a Salvation Army. And Victor Seastrom is the star of the film himself as well. There's Sister Edith. She's dying. She has tuberculosis. She wants to speak with a man named David Holm, who's played by Seastrom. He's sort of a town drunk. He's sitting in a graveyard talking to his 2 buddies. And he tells them about how his friend George told him about the legend of the Phantom Carriage. And also, I really like the color tinting of this. Like, when we're indoors, it has like that golden sepia tone. Then when we're outside, it's got like the really deep, cool blue tone at night. And then I think there's a day shot outside where it's got more of like a rosy pink kind of tint. I love those color tintings in these older films. And it did have Swedish intertitles with English subtitles. So that's when we we see the Phantom Carriage. It says how, he goes around, he collects all the dead people of the year. He brings sorrow, despair wherever he goes, even within himself. And the last person to die of the year at the stroke of midnight relieves the Phantom of his duties and becomes the new carriage driver for the next year. And that's why he gets scared every well, actually, this is also probably why it was very confusing back then, because it is even kind of confusing to me. I think it was he's telling his friends about the time George was telling him about the legend and why he was always so scared around midnight every year, and we're scared about dying. But then we see David, his two friends. I like the shot when he points up to the clock in the town, because it's literally just all black with like a little blue clock way up in the corner. He passes out. His friends leave him. But first, when we're seeing the Phantom for the first time during this sort of legend, we even see a suicide. We see him pick up a couple people. We see a suicide, like we see a guy kind of turn a gun towards his face. Phantom walks through the door. The Phantom bends down. I mean, he's transparent. The guy that just shot himself is laying on the floor. Reaches through him and pulls up the transparent soul of him. Again, very convincing looking. Still looks like a good effect. And I guess they had to do multiple layers to make it look more three-dimensional. Like, it wasn't just one layer overlaying the film. Because they also wanted the spirits to be able to like walk through doors, which happens. Walk through certain obstacles, but have obstacles in the background like still appear solid. So they had to do like quite a few layers. And also cameras back then, because there was something what was that called? And I guess post-production took quite a while. Optical printing wasn't available till the early 30s. So here, they had to do the layers by hand, and cameras were hand cranked. So, like when you see movies about old movies, they're sitting there. That was nice. Sitting there with the camera. But the cranking had to be the exact same speed as what you're laying over it. I guess so the picture is all exactly the same. So there was a lot of painstaking effort that went into making these effects. And I can imagine, because after he gets the suicide guy in the study, there's a shot of these waves crashing over these rocks, and there's sort of like a subsided little boat, and the carriage goes right out there. The Phantom gets out, picks the guy out of the water, and then he goes to David. David kind of picks himself out of his body, realizes the Phantom pulls down his hood, and it's George, and George and David recognize each other. And George realizes David is still like the town drunk, and he reminds him of his life. At one point, he was happy with his wife and his two children and his younger brother. And George led him down this life of just drunken recklessness. And we basically see his life over again, like him and his brother getting drunk with George, being imprisoned for drunken behavior. While he was in jail for drunken behavior, his brother got drunk and killed somebody. And he found this out the day before his release. And, he swears to his, I don't know if it was like his lawyer, whoever, that, he swears he's going to turn over a new leaf. Also, I did forget to mention, right before the clock hits 12, a friend of Edith, who wants to see David, finds him and tries to get him to go to the Salvation Army, and he won't go. He has no interest. But then, so we pretty much then he gets out of jail, he goes home, realizes the apartment is empty. The woman across the hall says, he thinks maybe his wife got ill, but the woman across the hall is like, no, she's fine. She took the kids and left. So then he's in the apartment by himself. The woman across the hall and this other woman are laughing. Basically, he swears revenge. He's going to scour Sweden to find her. Because it's not like she told him she was leaving. She just up and left and let him find out. And that pissed him off. So he goes all through Sweden. And one night, he arrives at the Salvation Army mission on New Year's Eve. There's a woman there named Maria who doesn't want to let him in because it's late, but Sister Edith lets him in. He's very rude to her. He's got like a jacket full of holes. They fix his jacket. And this is all a year prior now, when Sister Edith and David first meet. So we're seeing how they even know each other, because the film just opens up with her wanting to see this guy named David. He's sleeping. They fix his coat. And then the next day, she asks him to return in 1 year. She prayed, because she prayed that something about a first visitor would have good fortune for a certain period, I think between then and now. And she wants to know the outcome of her prayer. And he agrees, but then he tears the patches that they put in of his jacket, kind of being a dick. And so then George tells him that his promise has to be fulfilled, takes him to Edith, even though he doesn't want to go. I mean, he's still a spirit. So then we get to the Salvation Army, and we get another flashback of, I'm guessing it's somewhere in between the two New Year's Eves. Edith finds him at a bar with the guy that she sent at the opening of the film, and someone else, and try to get them to go persuaded the other guy to go home, the guy that she knows to come to the Salvation Army meeting, or both of them. The guy she knows completely opened up to God at the meeting. David didn't do anything. completely unmoved. And then but while they were at the meeting, David's wife was there, but he didn't recognize her. Anna tells Edith who she is and who he is, and she tries to get them to reconcile. And at first things are fine, and then we get the scene that that Kubrick was inspired by, which is his drunken behavior, his mean-spiritedness, put them right back where they were. And I thought it's because he was drunk, but I guess he was sick. She was begging him not to expose the kids to his consumption, which I'm guessing for that time was tuberculosis, which is what, because Edith caught it from him. That's why she's dying. And he refused. I guess he just wanted to be around his kids. I thought it was because he was being drunk, but she locked him in the kitchen and tried to run away with the kids again, but she fainted. And so that's when he gets the axe, breaks through the door. And a lot of the shots are the same, like seeing him hit the door. And then we get a shot of the other side straight on as the axe breaks through and him reaching through to unlock it. But when he gets through the door, he ceases being violent. He picks her up, gives her water, rests her head against a chair. He does kind of make some threatening statements, like, wasn't so easy this time. But he didn't hurt her. But, so then we get to the present when they're in Edith's room. And she's begging with the Phantom, George, to let her live until she sees David. You know, she wants him to fulfill his promise to come see her. And she thinks she's the one to blame for his sins because she was the one that tried to get Anne to reconcile with him and get back together. And this is when David kind of has his Grinch moment when he's actually moved by something, you know, someone who cared for him so much to not only try to get his wife to reconcile with him, but also kind of take the blame for his actions. So he kisses her hands. She sees his regret, and then she dies peacefully. Then I believe they do collect. Oh no, George tells him that others will collect her. I guess meaning angels. I'm guessing they... So it kind of makes you think, do they just take people to hell? Do they take them to limbo? Do they... Or maybe certain people get taken by other forces, I guess. But then he shows David where Anna and her kids are. And now Anna is sick. She has tuberculosis, but she's afraid of leaving them alone when and if she dies, that she's going to commit suicide. She's going to kill them and then herself via poison. David sees this, begs George to stop, and he says, I can't interfere with the living. And, you know, that he has this moment of, you know, something has to be done, but then he wakes up. Like, he's back in the graveyard. He wakes up. So, he must have died and then sort of came back, or I don't know. But he does, I guess he was just unconscious, but he wakes up and then he runs to where Anna is, begs her not to poison the kids and herself, promises that he's changed. I guess it's like the It's a Wonderful Life type ending. But then it's the end of the movie. And it's easy to see why it's so influential. I mean, I really like the story. I do see how... I mean, I did get kind of confused with the flashbacks within flashbacks. You know, at least with sound films, there's... I think this was one of the first movies to do that. So maybe it just wasn't as clear. But I did like the story. This guy who's just had a rotten life. He's been a rotten person. He's gonna... I guess his soul is destined to go on to be the worst thing imaginable because, you know, the Phantom, it is said how he just takes on pain and despair all over the world wherever he goes. And he has to do that for a year. And he pretty much kind of has to see the error of his ways through people. He sees them through these people, but we see them through flashbacks. And, you know, I guess this sort of near-death experience changes this guy. I really enjoyed it. I really liked the scene that Kubrick used for the axe. 'Cause I always like seeing what inspired, like, my favorite movies. The score, I don't know. This comes with 2 scores. There's a Swedish composer, Maddie Bai, and then the other's an experimental one that I didn't listen to. I don't know if it's the original score, just redone, but it does have it kind of reminded me of the music from Hateful Eight with the poison coffee scene, which I know was supposed to be in John Carpenter's The Thing. But with like one string instrument, it's a lot more subtle. That scene kind of reminded me of that. I liked the music. Again, the effects. I really like movies like that are this old where something that normally would be incredibly simple, I would imagine, but how difficult it was for them at that time just because of the technology, and still seeing how much better it looks than the shit that they try to do today to get the same effect. But yeah, I really dug this movie. I'm loving these silent films. Really enjoying either going back and, well, actually, the only ones I've seen more than once would have been ones I've already reviewed, like Caligari, Nosferatu, Phantom of the Opera. But all these other ones, like this, Hexen, Man Who Laughs, I've only seen once. But yeah, some great films in the 20s. It's easily becoming another one of my top favorite eras. Like the golden age, the 30s and 40s, with like Universal and RKO and all that. The silent 20s become another one of my top favorite eras. There's a lot of atmosphere in this too. Like, especially the scenes when we first see the Phantom. Like, this is kind of a zoomed in picture of the original cover, but there are these kind of barren landscapes where it's just a carriage just kind of going, you know, a silhouette of the ground, light of the sky, and just the dark carriage just kind of going along. Really like scenes like that. But Phantom Carriage, I really enjoyed this. As far as ones I've already seen, because Hexen was kind of more of like a pseudo documentary. I really did like The Man Who Laughs, but actually, I really liked the story to this one. Probably has one of my favorite stories of a silent film that I've seen so far. But yeah, Phantom Carriage, I really enjoyed it. Thank you for watching.